best £20 I've ever spent. So I got you with a title, didn't I? I'm learning about this clickbait YouTube stuff. So what I should do, because I'm learning about audience retention, is say I'll tell you at the end of the video what the best £20 I've ever spent is. But I'm not going to do that. I bought this bike off my mate for 20 quid, right? Absolute beauty. Best 20 quid I've ever spent. Now, why was it the best £20 I've ever spent? The bike is pretty beat up. It's not that good. It's a bit rusty, a bit dented, a bit dodgy. And my mate is more of a skateboarder, so he sold me this bike. So it's the best 20 quid I've spent because I've just used it so much, and the return on investment for that £20, so bearing in mind that is a small investment, the return has been massive. And when you compare that, I thought about this, there's a bit of a life lesson to this, right? I thought if you compare, like my family's always been into motorbikes, and I've spent thousands of pounds on motorbikes. But the return on investment, and although I did use the motorbike, some people buy a motorbike, park it out the front of their house and just ride it like every now and then. But I would ride my motorbike religiously every Sunday. I mean, that sounds bad, doing it on a Sunday religiously. You know what I mean? I would do it consistently once a week, every week, and I would go for a good ride. So I was getting use out of this motorbike, and it did add a lot of value to my life. It was kind of like my therapy at the time. I didn't have an outlet for certain emotions and energy, and the motorbike did serve that purpose. So although that was very valuable, when you compare that to the bike, I've used it so much and I've got no stress because it was so cheap. So you take the example of a nice car. Say you finance a new car, and I've seen this. People will buy, I deliver for my job, and there's this one house that I deliver to regularly, and they've got this really nice electric Audi parked out the front of their house, and they've got a back door where their kitchen is, and that's where they would rather have their delivery delivered because they can just unload it straight into their kitchen. But she always comes out the front door and says, don't go down the side, the car's parked too close to the house. And I could definitely get through with these boxes, and I'm not going to scratch the car. But she's so worried about me scratching the car that she'd rather carry all her shopping through the house. And to me, you've just invested in a liability. That's not an asset. Whereas to me, the bike is an asset. There's been times where I've had to lift the bike over fences and, just, if it was a brand new bike, I'd be worried about scratching it. But, so yeah, the return on investment, one, when you invest low, and so the lesson is, know what's going to bring you fulfillment in life, because sometimes you'll set your heart on a certain thing, like when I buy the house or when I get the car, or whatever it happens to be, and then you get it and there's like an emptiness. And I think you notice this most with, I noticed it with phones, right? Because phones update so quickly. Every year there's a better phone. I remember when I was around 16, started getting into iPhones, and they're expensive. iPhones are expensive in general, so you're like, oh, this is going to be amazing. It takes about 3 days for the novelty of a new iPhone to wear off, and then you get the latest one, and then 3 days later, it's like there's no difference. Whereas with this bike, so there's two practices. One is, I knew what was going to bring me fulfillment. I knew that bike. I enjoyed time outdoors. I enjoy going for rides with my friend. But also gratitude. I'm grateful for the bike. Although it was 20 quid, you have a tendency when you don't spend a lot of money on something to just disregard it. But every time I get on that bike, I think I'm brainwashing myself at this point, because I reaffirm the fact that this is the best £20 I've ever spent. I've told this story to so many people, and now I'm telling it to you, that I've just, like I say, I've completely brainwashed myself. But I don't think that's a bad thing. And this might surprise you if you start thinking along these lines. It might surprise you what actually is valuable in your life, and it won't cost a lot. So I'll give you the motorbike analogy again. I spent thousands of pounds on a high-spec racing motorbike that was just an absolute machine. Beautiful bike. I'll try and get a picture, actually, I'll put it up. And I would own another one of these in a heartbeat, but I'd just get an older one that costs less money. It doesn't have to be that good. And that brought me joy, right? And then, because of my job, I bought a moped. Right, so as a motorbike rider, a moped is like, you don't do that. You either ride a motorbike or a moped, you're one or the other. But I had the motorbike and then got this moped. And on the motorbike, because it's a race bike and I was extremely fast, I couldn't really ride with anyone else. Nobody could keep up, and it wasn't, I would go for solo rides on my own. Whereas with the moped, I had other friends that were on mopeds and on slower bikes the same speed. Like, my moped was slower than some of their bikes, so it was more fun. I had much more fun on the moped, zipping around trying to keep up with my friends, than I did on the motorbike. And I didn't anticipate that. I just thought, the more money I spend on this fancy bike, the better. But the moped was fun. And I honestly think I had more fun on the moped than I did the Fireblade. Right, we've got the hovercraft coming back. I don't know where it is, whether you can see it. So yeah. But yeah, I guess the lesson is, sometimes what you think is going to bring you fulfillment in life doesn't. And the cheap thing that you kind of take for granted is actually amazing. So you've got to cultivate gratitude and just try and notice. Because we just tend to associate, I spent more money on this, so it's got to be better. But the return on investment doesn't work like that. So yeah, let me know if there's anything you've... And again, this isn't obvious. It sounds like an obvious point. Oh, you got use out of the bike, so it's a good return on investment. But there'll be things in your life that you didn't anticipate bringing you so much joy. Even just, it comes down to like, you know, like that chair that you didn't expect to be really good. That was a bad example. Everybody's got that thing. I've got a bowl that I made when I was a kid. Like, we did one of those, you know, craft your own bowl things, and it was like finger painted and it's all dodgy. But whenever I'm making something that I need to put in a bowl, I'll always go for that bowl. And I didn't even pay for it. Do you know what I mean? I think it was a school trip or something. And that's my favourite bowl. I could go out and spend a lot of money on a new bowl. That's another bad analogy. God, I'm cracking out all the terrible analogies today. But yeah, I think you get the idea. Let me know if there's something that resonates that you think, yeah, I didn't expect this because it was cheap, but it's added a lot of value to my life. So I'll just make another quick point while I remember. Like, I'm down here on the beach on the Isle of Wight. Now, a lot of my friends after we left school, like peers that I went to school with, all wanted to move to London, right? But people pay money. This is like a holiday destination in the summer. It's got beautiful white sandy beaches. So the return on investment of just staying here, like, do you know what I mean? Like, people pay money to come here on holiday, and people, my friends and peers, have moved from here to London, and people from London come here on holiday. So I was grateful enough and noticed that this is an asset. Moving to London would be a liability for me. And a lot of those people will go to London, live that life for a few years, and then come back because they realise it's paradise. So that's just another example, and it's easy to take for granted when you're here. Like, my friends would say, oh, it's boring, there's nothing to do. And to me, that's the point, you know. So this is the bowl I was talking about. Look at that sketchy 5-year-old paint job. But that is my favourite bowl, and I always use it. I thought of another example as well. We did stilt walking when I was younger, and we used to practice for like long walks. There's a thing called Walk the Wight, where you walk across the island, and people normally just do it on foot, but we do it on stilts, or we did do a couple of times. So we was practicing, and when we was on a practice walk once, I found this knife just kind of stabbed into the ground. So it was like up to the handle, and I pulled it out, and it had a red handle on at the time. And I like washed it off and used it. And I used that knife every day since, and that was my favourite knife. And then the handle broke on it, and I liked the knife so much. I never used to like serrated knives, but I really like this one. Then the handle broke and I was gutted, and then I got my dad to like make me a makeshift handle. And look how sketchy that handle is. It's just riveted on. And he would have done a nice wooden handle, but I wanted like something a bit rustic like that. And I used this knife, and then after a while it just was going dull and you can't sharpen it because it's serrated. So I was searching to find a replacement, and I found this knife. And I didn't actually realise, but after I bought this, it's the same brand. When I looked for a brand on here and I couldn't see anything. And then after I bought this, I realised it's actually the same brand. So this is the exact same knife, just with a black handle. But it wasn't quite the same. I didn't like it as much as this knife. And I found this one. So I've paid for this. But that knife I just found on the floor, and that's my favourite knife. So you'd think sunk cost. I've got more of a sunk cost in this one, but I prefer that one. Anyway, so I was using this knife. Not quite happy with it. It's not like this knife. And then I found this knife 2 days after buying this. So that one breaks. I found that in the floor and it had a red handle. Bought this one. 2 days after buying that, realised I didn't like it because it wasn't as good as that one. I found this knife, red handled knife, on the floor. Washed it off, like give it a good clean. And now I use this, and this is my favourite knife. So this one I don't even use, and I paid for that one. This is my favourite knife, and I found it. So I think you get what I'm saying. The other thing is, this is just a side note. This is more of a spiritual thing. But the brand of this knife is called Devil's Kitchen. And like I said, I didn't realise until afterwards, but this is also a Devil's Kitchen knife. And I don't like the fact that symbolically, like, the devil is in a lot of things, and I rarely see the opposite. I rarely see, like, you know, for Halloween you might dress up. Halloween's a bad example because it's meant to be scary, but I've seen, like, at football matches, people in the crowds will have devil horns on, but I never see somebody with a halo. Or I never see a kitchen knife where that's called Devil's Kitchen. I never see it called, like, the Lord's Kitchen. And it just seems strange to me that you can use symbolism, the devil, but I rarely see the opposite. I mean, I have just kind of proved myself wrong, because on Halloween last year, I remember seeing some Jesuses walking around. And I think that's a good sign. I think that's, like, it shows that people are more conscious. But yeah, you'll happily have the Devil's Kitchen knife. And I've been speaking to my friend about how food is made, and whether food's made with love or not, right? So the Buddhists kind of do these meals, or maybe it's the Hare Krishna people. They do these meals and they're like blessed, and you can bless water. And I think a meal made with the Devil's Kitchen knife, is that going to be made with love over a knife that was like the Lord's knife? Anyway, I've probably lost a lot of people there, but you get the idea.